Welcome back in, everybody, to Warchant TV, and football is upon us, folks. This is the last little bit of speculation that we get to do here on Warchant TV before we have field reports from Charlotte for the ACC kickoff, from practice in just a week from now, right here in Tallahassee. So make sure you see it to the left of me on the screen. Hit the like button, subscribe to Warchant TV. If you haven't done so already, we bring you the best FSU coverage in the business, and it's led by the two gentlemen that are above me here on the screen. Ira Schoffel, the managing editor of Warchant.com, is right there top left, and Gene Williams, the founder and administrator of Warchant.com, is on the top right. And today we're talking 10 predictions. That's right, 10 early predictions for the 2022 FSU football season. We'll take a look at some numbers from last year. It's kind of like an over-under game, but not quite. You'll be able to follow along. You're a smart audience out there, and we'll start with number one. And Ira, I'm going to go to you. Here it is. Prediction number one, Jordan Travis. How many touchdown passes will he throw for in 2022? Last year, he threw for 15, and he wasn't always the starter. So what say you this year?
I went with a real complicated formula here. I went with 2 touchdowns per game.
Yep.
So I ended up with 24, which was, I think he could go substantially over that because, one thing to remember about last year is obviously he didn't play for a good chunk of it, especially early in the season when they were still looking hard at Mackenzie Milton as the starting quarterback. And then the other factor is I think, you look at the additions on the offensive line, you look at the additions in the receiving core. I just think that there's potential for him to have a much better passing year. The problem with it, and I think we all probably wrestled with it, is you don't know how many of those red zone trips are going to end up being rushing. He may rush for a bunch of touchdowns or the running backs may score some touchdowns, but I do think he's going to improve substantially over last year. I think 24 is about a baseline. I'd be surprised if he was much less than that.
Yeah, I said the same thing. Our 24 for me is a similar formula, which is you can't have a 3-to-1 rushing to passing touchdown ratio if you're trying to get to that magic number. And Corey wrote about that on Warchant.com earlier in the offseason. The 31, 32 points is the magic number. So if you need 4 touchdowns, 2 better be through the air. Gene, you had the most among this little panel of ours at 25.
Outrageous.
$1, Bob. So you went one over. Talk to me about Jordan Travis and your expectations for him.
Yeah, not much to add from what Ira said. I mean, it's better all around him, better offensive line, some more wide receivers to throw to. And, he started, I think, 8 games last year. And so you throw 8 games, you extrapolate that, I think goes to like 22.5. And I just think with his improvement and all the additions on that offense, I just threw out 25. I don't know. It seems closer to have another 2.5 touchdowns. Again, I think all of us are saying this, assuming he stays healthy for 90+% of the season. Obviously, that's a big question. If he gets injured, that number is going to go way down. But I agree with Ira. I think 23, 24 is probably the base. He has a potential to get anywhere from there to 30, maybe, depending on how things shake out.
Yep. Red zone is a place of variables, so we'll see how Florida State shakes out and if they score more touchdowns in the red zone this year. Another number, Gene, that would be affected if Jordan Travis was not healthy would be number 2 in our prediction count, rushing yards per carry. Now, this is a pretty good number for Florida State in 2021, considering they couldn't get 4 yards per carry, as in they weren't in 2nd and 6, then 3rd and 2, and moving the chains. This is a lot about explosive plays that got Florida State to 4.8. And you can see in the full screen now our predictions. Ira and I, again, in full agreement at 5.1 yards per carry in 2022. Gene at 5.3. So, Gene, we'll start with you. You see a modest improvement, about 10% year over year, a little bit better than that. Why do you think the rushing attack is going to produce more yards per carry in 2022?
Well, the biggest thing you look at last year, and I did a end-season Pro Football Focus kind of rundown of the various things, and it really surprised me how bad run blocking was last year. I mean, they were, if I look this up, the grade for overall Florida State's run blocking last year is 52.1. And to put that in perspective, that was number 120 out of 130 teams. That was really freaking bad. And, again, we've talked about the offensive line, man. There's so many that basically the bulk of them are back. You've got a couple really good additions. There's real depth. If a guy or two goes down, I don't think it's the end of the world. So I think run blocking will be significantly improved. And we're going to talk about it later, but I'm a big believer in Trey Benson. I think you've got a lot of guys, him and Toafili and Ward, some guys who can do some explosive big play runs. You throw in Jordan Travis, I think it's very reasonable. And this is a team that averaged 5.1, that horrific 2020 team. It was awful. They even averaged 5.1 per carry. So I think 5.2, 5.3 is very reasonable given what this team has coming back.
Ira, I loved your number so much I copied it, 5.1. Why do you think there's improvement this year?
Well, first, I just want to point out what you said in the last category is that Gene did have the option to make his picks last, based on, and he keeps going with this Price is Right wagering, where he just kind of keeps going right over.
$1 over.
And it's not really fair. So, when we look back at this in the end of the year, Gene's going to always be the genius.
Being the boss has his privileges.
Yeah, I just think, same thing. I mean, it's hard to quantify because, again, college football has the stupid sack rule where sack yardage comes off of rushing yardage. And so I think that hurts them to some degree. But I think, you're going to have Jordan Travis, who his ability to run, I think is going to be accentuated if the passing game is better. I mean, it all goes together. If the passing game is better, which we think it will be, it could help the running game as well. So, I think there was a point last season and probably the season before that where teams said, okay, we don't trust you to throw the ball down the field. We're going to step up. We're going to crowd the box. And I think that's going to be harder for teams to do in 2022.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard to project so many explosive runs like last year. I don't know that they'll be able to generate as many of those, but I think they're going to be in more of those aforementioned 2nd and 6s or 2nd and 7s, where they're going to be able to establish a presence, maybe run that tempo a little bit more by winning first down. That's number 2 on the list. We've got 10 of these folks. Number 3 on the list, actually, Gene, I'll ask you very quickly. We'll go to Ira for the first wave of analysis. But on my note sheet, I don't see your tally for total defensive sacks. The world does. I'm the last to know here. Ira and I are last to know.
I'm saving all the suspense. So this time, Tom, I'm going to copy you because I wrote it down and for some reason didn't go through. I've got 27.
Okay.
On the year. Just real quick, obviously they're not going to be as good as last year, losing Jermaine Johnson and everything else there. But I still think it's going to be, I think the defense on the whole is going to be better. We can look about, I think they're going to get more coverage type sacks because I think they're so much better on the back end than they were last year, although they're probably not going to get as many explosive, the defensive end barreling through like Johnson got so many just because he out-talented the guy in front of him. There won't be as many of those. But I think a better defense will create more situations for sacks. So I think they'll be decent, just not to the level of last year.
Yeah, Ira, you got 28. I've got 27. I'm thinking that Florida State might rack up somewhere close to 7 or 8 through the first 2 games. Duquesne's going to help that number. But then there are so many veteran quarterbacks that they're playing, too. It's not just about what they lost. And they lost a lot between Jermaine Johnson and Keir Thomas. But they're going up against a lot of good quarterbacks. So you have them at 28. Why did you land on that number?
Yeah, I originally was thinking, because of what you're talking about and losing Jermaine Johnson, I originally was thinking lower. I was thinking maybe like 23, 24. But I do think that run defense is going to be so stout. I think it's going to be good. You look at what they've got in the interior of the defensive line. You look at Tatum Bethune helping that linebacking core. I think the run defense is going to be much improved. And so I don't think it's going to be as big of a drop-off as maybe we would think, as I would have thought when I originally started looking at it.
Number 4 on this list is a final pass blocking grade for the offensive line. 10 new bodies between last football season and this football season for FSU, 5 via the transfer portal, 5 via high school classes. So the transfer portal are going to be where Florida State leans on some of these candidates to fortify the O-line. Last year's pass blocking grade, not great, 68.0. You see the list from everybody. I'm the low man here. I had it at 70. I don't think there's going to be that much improvement, and I'll tell you my reason real fast. I think there are going to be a lot more dropbacks. That's why. I think this offense has more balance, more good receivers, and therefore with more balance leads to more dropbacks. There might be some more missed assignments. But it's improvement to 70. Ira, you had Florida State at 72.5. Why do you think they're going to improve pass blocking this year?
Well, one of the things that would help me with this exercise if I really knew how they calculated the PFF grades, but since we don't, I just said, man, they're going to be a little bit better than they were last year. And because I think they are going to be better. I think, not only did you add new players, but you brought in some experienced tackles. So again, and I expect Robert Scott, and we'll touch on him later. I think Robert Scott's going to have a big improvement this year. I think he was banged up a little bit last year. I think it was new to him to be a starting left tackle. I think he's going to play a lot better. And you have a lot of options at the other tackle position, and you have a lot of experience inside. So I just think that they're going to be better. But, man, picking that number seemed like, I'm just throwing darts at this point.
Gene, you threw darts in about the same part of the board as Ira did, 73 to Ira's 72.5. So what say you? Why that much improvement?
Yeah, I can't add much more of this again. We think there's going to be a modest improvement. We're quibbling over a percentage or two by PFF, which we don't understand. But they should be better, to Ira's point. I mean, a lot of players are back. And I mentioned earlier, I think that depth is going to go a long way because you're playing guys like Devontae Love-Taylor last year, who's playing at 50%. Maury Smith was battling a back injury. I don't think he was very good last year because of injuries, but they didn't have other options. This year, if you get a guy that's banged up, you've got options, and I think that'll really help in those situations. So I do think the pass blocking will be noticeably better. It'll be average. Let's say that strive for average this year instead of a little below average.
Prediction number 5 is the leading rusher for Florida State this season, and how many yards will they rack up? Interesting here. I'm going to go back to Ira. I'm breaking the rules that I set before this video because he is the only one of us to pick Treshaun Ward. And also, Ira's total, as you can see there on the screen, is the lowest rushing yard total of Gene, myself, or Ira. So Treshaun Ward, 840 yards for Ira. Why did you go with the incumbent Ira this season?
I really do think they're going to be split pretty evenly, the carries and the rushing yards. And I think, and look, I love Trey Benson. I was impressed with him right off the bat. I loved him in the spring. So I think he's going to do a lot of good things. But I do think that Treshaun Ward, I think back to what he did last year. And there were some games where I felt like Treshaun Ward was underutilized because of Jashaun Corbin. And I think now he's the older guy. He's the more experienced guy. He really knows the offense. He knows the system. I just think he's got potential to break off some of those bigger plays too, especially because I think they might have better blocking on the perimeter from the wide receivers. So I just think Treshaun Ward's going to have a little bit better year, but I think it's going to be pretty even.
Gene, a change in opinion, a difference of opinion here. 955 yards. You got Trey Benson knocking on the door of 1,000 yards this season. Why did you pick Benson, and why that many yards?
If we go back to the top 40 we did, I think Jeff and I both had Trey Benson, I think number 6 or something. We had him pretty high. To me, just seeing him the little bit we saw him in spring, to me, he's the best pure runner on the team. I love Treshaun. Tofile's big breaking bit, but I just think talent-wise, the size, the speed, everything he can do, I think he's going to stand out. Yes, it's going to be somewhat of a committee, but I think you've got to give – if he's standing out above these other two, he's got to get more carries. And I do think the run blocking, which was bad last year, is going to be a lot better, to Ira's point as well. So I think better run blocking, and a guy that's, to me, again, I think he's the best pure runner Florida State's had since Cam Akers. So I think when you have a guy that's that good in the backfield, again, a small sample, he hadn't done it yet, but the little I've seen, if he's as good as I think he is, I think he can get close to that 1,000-yard mark this year.
I had Trey not too far behind Eugene. Trey Benson at 915 yards. It's the neighborhood of where Corbin was last year. Corbin was on a pitch count and touch count of about 10 to 12 carries a game on average. I think Benson's going to land those. But like Ira said, I think it's going to be a committee. So it's not like Treshaun Ward's only going to have 200 or 300 yards. He'll be well up there. Now we go to the receivers. This one is interesting because there's an influx of new bodies in Tallahassee. If you are a fan and a subscriber to Warchant TV, you know about this. We've been talking about the receivers all offseason. If not, hit that subscribe button right now. The leading receiver for this team this year, you see the numbers. Mycah Pittman is the consensus number 1 wide receiver, at least for right now. If Winston Wright was healthy, maybe this would be a bit of a different discussion. But, Gene, you've got Mycah Pittman over 800 receiving yards. That would more than double last season's leading wide receiver for Florida State. Why do you have Pittman so high in terms of production?
Everything we've seen in the spring, he was by far the most reliable receiver. And I just think this situation, when you're a quarterback and it's a key third down, you're trying to keep a drive alive, you're going to go to that guy time and time again. We've seen Mycah Pittman has that ability to get open. He's got that moxie. He's going to fight to get that first down or get in the end zone. That's why I think he's going to be your go-to guy. But, Tom, as you said, the wrinkle in this whole thing is we don't know about Winston Wright. If he comes back early in the season, it could throw all of this up. He may end up being your leading receiver, and he would certainly cut into Micah's potential yardage that he can rack up. So a little bit of this is based on, I'm guessing that Winston Wright's going to pay a half or a little less than half the season is why I have that total pretty high. If he comes back a lot earlier and he's ready to go, I think that number comes down a little bit. But I think Mycah Pittman is still – at least by 100, 200 yards or so, going to be the leading receiver on this team.
Yeah, Ira, so I'll ask you a bit of a different question because you're at 790 for Pittman. I'm at 750. But I remember the top 40 list. You had Winston Wright up there pretty good. So do you think that Mycah Pittman gets pushed by somebody like Winston Wright? Is it close, or is he far and away Florida State's leading receiver?
Yeah, I am more optimistic about Winston Wright coming back earlier in the season than late in the season or midway through. I think there's a chance he plays in the first half of the season. The problem is, I think there's going to be some good opportunities to pick up a lot of yardage early in the season. Obviously the Duquesne game, Louisville's defense has not been very good in the past. So there's Wake Forest defense was awful last year. So a lot of those great opportunities for big yardage might be in the first half of the season. So I think that's why I went with Mycah Pittman. But I do think Winston Wright's going to be a big factor this year. It just may not be in time to take advantage of some of those defenses that would give up a lot of yards.
We'll switch to the defensive side of the ball. The leading tackler, and we're going to start with Gene here because he thinks that there's going to be a 2-time defending tackling champion on Florida State's defense. Ira and I say linebacker, Tatum Bethune, the transfer. Gene says Jamie Robinson holds it down another year with 92 tackles, Gene says. So why do we stick with Jamie Robinson, Gene, and not go to a linebacker?
Did you guys see the Florida game? He had a lot of was it 18 tackles in that game? I mean, I guess I have that vision in my mind that he's a freaking tackling machine. And it took him a while to get settled in, but once he was settled in as that full-time starter there, man, he cleaned up everything out there. And I just think he's going to continue to just swoop up a lot of tackles. And I think Tatum, I guess I was not overly blown away by Tatum Bethune in the spring. I think he's going to start. I think he's going to have a lot of tackles. And my pick would be a close second behind Robinson. But I guess I wasn't exactly blown away by him. He's going to have to learn a new system, so maybe it takes him a while to settle in. So I'm going with Jamie on that one. I think you guys are underselling him. I mean, he got all those tackles last year for a reason. He's really freaking good.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it. He plays close enough to the line of scrimmage. It's just, for me, I think it's a sign of a healthy football team if a linebacker is leading the way in terms of tackles. I am at 95. Ira, you have him at 98, right on the precipice of a 100 tackle season. So what did you see from Tatum Bethune, and why do you have him as the leader in your prediction?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super high on Tatum Bethune, and I think part of the reason Jamie Robinson had to have so many tackles was because I think in that Florida game, Akeem Dent had a huge game as well. Both safeties did, because Florida State's linebackers did not play very well at all. I think that again, I was a little bit scarred growing up as a Colts fan, because back in the day, the Colts safeties would always be their leading tacklers. That's how bad they were. And I just think it's not a good sign if your safeties have that many tackles. So I think Tatum Bethune, I like him a lot. I think he's going to plug a lot of those holes and not have as many missed assignments. I think he's going to shore up that front seven.
Number 8 on our list, we go to special teams. We had to. I know. It was mandated. It's no big deal. We'll get through this together. But special teams last year, 67.9 grade. That almost feels generous from Pro Football Focus. This year, all of us say that it will be improved. Gene has it at 75.5, Ira 74, myself 72. So I'll start with me since I'm the low man. Catching punts will help, but there are other facets of special teams, like kick returns and kick coverage. And I don't know that they're going to be much better at that. I'll believe it when I see it. They work it really hard in practice. We know all that, but I'll believe it when I see it in the other regards. I know that they'll be better when it comes to punt returns just because they're going to catch the ball. Gene, you're the biggest optimist at 75.5, so go ahead.
Mike Norvell's been very good on special teams his entire career. Last year was an aberration. Everything went so wrong early on. I think it just fell on itself and got worse and worse and worse. We talked about Mycah Pittman. I think immediately that's going to solve a major problem on punt returns right there. Your kicking teams are all back. You don't think all the coaches, Mike Norvell, Papuchis, all those guys are embarrassed by what happened on special teams and they're not putting in extra time to fix that this year? I think you're going to see a dramatic improvement from maybe the worst in the country to average, and that is a dramatic improvement. But that grade, I guess, is right about average. I think there's enough on that team and good enough coaching that they should at least have average special teams this year.
Ira, aspire to be average. Is that the goal this year, and can they achieve it? You had 74.0 in the PFF.
Yeah, I would just co-sign what Gene said. I agree. All those are all the points I was going to make as well. Couldn't say it any better.
Number 9, then, offensive lineman with the highest grade. We have one man different on the panel. And again, Gene and I are in agreement. We say Dylan Gibbons is the linchpin for the offensive line this year, and he will grade out the highest. Ira says Robert Scott. Now, that's interesting. You teased it earlier, Ira. But if Robert Scott is the highest graded offensive lineman for Florida State in 2022, that's probably a really good sign. Why are you high on number 52 at left tackle?
Yeah, and I almost went with Dylan Gibbons also, but I go back to last season, and they were really excited about what Robert Scott could do, even though, he was a younger offensive tackle. He didn't have a ton of experience, hadn't had a ton of time in the weight room going into last season. And, and he probably underperformed. I think it was a combination of two things. One, just the inexperience factor. I think that hurt him. But I think the other thing was, I'm still convinced he wasn't healthy in his lower body, whether it was an ankle, whatever it was early last season. And I feel like that inhibited him a good deal. And as the year went on, I thought he got better and better. Now, obviously, late in the season, they all got exposed by Clemson and Florida, and some of the better pass rushers they went against. But I think he's going to be much better than he was a year ago. He's bigger and stronger. And I think he knows it's his position now at left tackle. And I think that is going to help him as well.
Gene, we went chalk with Dylan Gibbons. Why? Why'd you go with Dylan Gibbons?
Well, he was the top-rated pass blocker and run blocker last year for Florida State. It's probably easier to grade at a guard position. I think he'll have more help around him too this year. I think the play, regardless of who wins the center position and a tackle, I think it'll be better around him, so he won't be as exposed enough to make mistakes. So this is just kind of a pragmatic pick. And I agree, though, like you said, if Robert Scott grades out the highest, first of all, he's going to make a lot of money, and good for him, and that'll be a good sign for the offense as well.
Yeah, he'll make a lot of money either by staying through NIL or by going on to the next level if he's the highest graded offensive lineman. What a weird time we live in. But number 10 in our final prediction for the year, Florida State's final record. Now, we have all kinds of weird features of this, like W's and L's and whatever you guys do on Warchant message boards. You guys are part of this, and there's a thread about it every single week. We have complete consensus.
Yeah.
It's 8-4. So I guess, Ira, I'll start with you. We'll do it a little bit differently. What do you think Florida State's most impressive win is going to be? Let's add a little bit to the prediction meter. It's easy to say 8-4. What game do you circle and say, here's where they can prove that they have improved in Tallahassee?
Yeah, and first of all, it surprised me we were all consensus because I was torn between 7-5 and 8-4. It wasn't like 100% strong feeling that they're definitely going to be 8-4. I think that there's a couple of opportunities. I don't know that I would say this game is the game they're going to win, but I think there's 2 or 3 games that will be impressive if they win. Obviously, I think they can beat LSU. I think they can beat. I think they're going to beat Wake Forest at home, which is a 10-win team a year ago. That wouldn't sound very impressive, but it was a 10-win team. They've got a great quarterback in Sam Hartman, but I think Florida State's going to win that game. Of the games where I think people would not expect them maybe to win or might get more national attention, I think the Florida game at home. I don't think Florida is going to make a huge jump in Billy Napier's first season. I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's some growing pains there. So it may not be an impressive win in terms of the final score, but just, again, knocking off one of your rivals, kind of ending that skid against Florida, I think would be a nice feather in Mike Norvell's head cap. And I like Florida State to win that game late in the season at home.
Gene, were you torn between 7-5 and 8-4 like Ira? And after you answer that question, which game do you circle and say, like, is it like Ira Black Friday or some other game where Florida State can prove that they have actually improved and taken a step forward?
Yeah, you're right. It was I kept going back and forth on that one, and one of the things that really convinced me, and I think Jeff, I threw this out to Jeff to talk about on his show, or maybe we'll also do it on the College Sports Book, but that was the Action Network had a story they featured Florida State as one of their must-buys on overs for season totals. And the writer went through this whole analysis and their analytics and stuff they do, so that their number projection for Florida State, their computer analytics, whatever they did, spit out 7.7 as their total thing. Well, you can't get – that's closer to 8 than 7. So I just, based on that, I was torn between. So that convinced me slightly to go over. And they made a lot of good arguments about how Florida State should be really better across the board. I think the thing that scares me is the schedule is a lot more difficult than maybe it has been the last couple of years. So it might be an 8-win team, but because of that tough schedule, it could end up being 7. As for the game, I was thinking about saying Florida too, but to be different, I'm going to throw it out there. Tom, I think we're going to be partying on Bourbon Street. I think that'll be the one early on. They take down the SEC team. All the momentum, all the excitement returns to Tallahassee after that big win in New Orleans.
I will copycat off of Eugene with that. I think that's it, the circumstances surrounding that game outside of location all point to Florida State. Like if you switched Miami and LSU, you could make it's like the other side of a coin because Miami will be under Cristobal more formed and they'll understand the system when Florida State plays them late in the year, so that's a disadvantage.
Correct.
But for LSU under a new coach, you get the game the week before. You have continuity through the offseason, and LSU apparently has offensive line issues. We'll learn more about them as we get closer to kickoff of week 1. But that's a game that screams national attention for a big-time win for Florida State. Again, I went 8-4 as well. Remember, everybody, as you're watching this, we are traveling up to Charlotte for the ACC kickoff. The 2022 ACC kickoff will have all the coverage from Atlantic Day, especially. That's FSU's day on Wednesday. Make sure to stay locked in to Warchant TV for all of that coverage. We'll be live 1 to 3 p.m. Wednesday as well with the Jeff Cameron Show. Either Ira or myself will patch in, and we'll give you some updates from what's going on in Charlotte. It should be a busy week here at warchant.com, as well as camp starting next week, we assume, probably the week of the 25th of July. So make sure to subscribe to this channel right now. You'll get all the FSU coverage that you can stand and more before kickoff against Duquesne on August 27th. For Ira Schoffel, the managing editor of Warchant.com, and for Gene Williams, the founder and administrator of Warchant.com, my name is Tom Lang, and we will leave you with some observations from our boards on the Tribal Council. We're scrolling through those right now. Here are your predictions. Seen a lot of low numbers for Jordan Travis and touchdown passes, a lot in the low 20s. A lot of you guys like Trey Benson to be the leading rusher for Florida State this year as well. Enjoy all the thoughts from the masses, everybody, as we sign off on Warchant TV. Remember, like and subscribe, and we will talk to you all right here on your ultimate Seminole sports source on YouTube, Warchant TV, next time.